You all wanted to see some half-plate fencing, so here we are, in 98-degree Fahrenheit weather. We're counting armor as worn, so no scoring points on anything metal. Halberds are great at hooking, and 2 halberds are even better. So you often find yourself in these sort of socially distanced wrestling clinches. We're also counting Red Fencer's mask overlay as a helmet. I've done some harness fencing before, but this is my first time really doing it in half-plate, which really changes the game. So many core targets are protected, but those extremities are still open. Rather than being concerned about attacks to anywhere, you're now hyper-focused on both targeting and protecting your few vulnerabilities. Here I give up on the axe head and switch to my butt spike, which I try to sneak in and get a headshot. Here I try to establish a hook over his haft, but I miss and have to kind of back off and re-approach. I do manage to catch his thrust with my axe and I set it aside. I try to provoke him a little bit, he tries to thrust, but my breastplate takes the hit. We're both working with the spikes here, they're more nimble and less likely to get stuck. I land a shot on his arm. Once again, I am saved by my breastplate. I try to get a thrust on the face, he turns around and goes for a stab to the groin. A very valid target when we're talking armor. I posture up in a high guard and try to provoke him by cutting down into a low position. He bites, and then I set it aside and work my point in for a thrust to the face. This next pass is interesting because of the armor malfunction. My tacet is stuck up, which exposes my hip to his thrust. It can be really hard to tell when these foam tips hit, so we're not ignoring blows, we just don't know that they're there. The apparent stillness is us feeling and applying different amounts of pressure, and once I feel the opening, I shoot for the face. I cut my way in close before switching to my butt spike and landing that as a thrust to the face. And here's that cool one-handed rising cut from Meyer. It hits his hands. I go for another one of those one-handed stabs, and I try to get my own hand out of the way, but he manages to hit it too. Here I try to open up his arm for a hit, but his spalder takes the hit instead. Here we get into some close plays. I try to make a grab for his haft, but he pulls away. I try to set up another hook with a cut. We get into almost grappling, but neither of us are really in the mood for it right now. After a brief break to get some water and try to lower our body temperatures a bit, we're back with longswords. What might come as a surprise to some of you is that we are not in half-sword right now, but I remind you that there are a lot of open, juicy targets, and going to half-sword from this distance would leave them pretty exposed. I've been working at getting a shot on his hands, but the opportunity arises to get a thrust to the face, and I don't pass it up. I try to do a descending sneaky cut towards his right, but he catches it on the cross. I was hoping by throwing it from a low right guard, it would be a little unexpected. Next is a great example of why I wasn't going to half-sword while there were such shallow targets available. The hands are just way too exposed. Here he makes for a blade grab, which normally could have set him up for great options, but my armor was covering me and I managed to rip it out of his hand. I try to set up a hand shot, but have to abort my offense to protect my own hand. Then the distance collapses and I transition into half-sword, but nothing really comes of this. He sets up another blade grab, which is far more successful as I'm unable to wrench my sword away, and he gets some stabs on my hand. Here my cut to his hand manages to collapse his parry enough to land on his arm. What I find interesting about this exchange are the number of half starts and stops. We both want to land a hit, but we don't want to get hit, so we're not committing unless we're confident. Once again, attempting half-sword while there are still shallow targets available. I try for a cheeky one-handed thrust, and I just flat out miss it. I am able to get a funky angle on his arm, though. I try to set up an opportunity to attack his weak leg, but he passes it back. He gets a really good hold on my sword, and my helmet saves me from a couple thrusts, but he does eventually land it. I see him begin to drop towards half-sword, and I figure, yeah, it's go time, and I close in, and we start going for it. I land the thrust. He goes for another blade grab, but my sword was very much still moving when he does, so he probably would have gotten cut pretty bad. He lands a rising cut to my hand. And there you go. We're utterly drenched, but it was a fun experience.